Hey you, yeah you who clicked on this video. Thanks for giving our channel a shot. And if you will, please do us the honor of watching the video all the way through. Appreciate it. Now onto the video.
Hello, fellow 8-bit heroes. We're here to discuss episode 3 of The Last of Us, Long Time. Oh man. So, the reason that we've taken so long to address this episode is because I really wanted to get my thoughts together on it. And after I've had a little bit of time to kind of marinate, watch the episode a second time, and really just kind of get over the, let's say, emotional trickery that has happened in this episode, I was really able to hone down my feelings on it. And, now I feel like I'm ready to discuss it with you, and hopefully you guys are ready to discuss it with me. So let's get into it. So this episode follows the death of Tess, in which she instructs Joel to go and find Frank and Bill. Now, this episode to me is divisive, and I'll tell you why. So, if you love this game, you know who Bill is. And if you've never played this game, you do not know who Bill is. So, that being said, I can now go into how this episode, or how I felt about it. So this episode starts with Joel and Ellie going into a basically like a diner. And this scene happens in the game where they are looking for a stash that Joel left behind, and Ellie, gets to see an arcade machine, and she's talking about a friend of hers who had played the game. Now they've changed it, obviously. In the game, they're talking about some made-up game that doesn't exist in our world, and in this particular scene, they're talking about Mortal Kombat. So that was interesting. Joel's looking for what he stashed, and Ellie, wanders off. And here's where things kind of get weird for me in this episode, because make no mistake, this episode has almost nothing to do with the overall story, and we'll get into that in a minute. But this Ellie, there's something that's just been bothering me in the back of my mind, whether it's the way in which she delivers lines, or the constant vulgarity that the writers felt the need to put in, and just her overall way of being. But this scene with her and an infected, I guess this is an infected that's going through the transition of becoming a clicker, but being that he is pinned under rubble, cannot really get anywhere, and Ellie kind of just sits and watches it, and then ends its life, but not in a merciful way, but more in almost like a sadistic way. And I don't know how I feel about that, just because the Ellie of the games is not anywhere near that. She's, even in this terrible world, she's still wide-eyed and hopeful. And I don't know how I feel about the direction that I feel they're taking it. So, that's happening. But then we get to what anime fans know and loathe: filler. And that's what this episode is. That's really the conclusion that I came to. I mean, it's well done filler, but it's filler nonetheless. And what's weird about it is that this is actually a very important part in the game's story that introduces a really interesting character, a very capable character, but a character with flaws and with layers to him. And this character, to me, has kind of been reduced to a well thought out box ticking exercise, if I'm being honest. Let me explain. So the character of Bill in this series, he's a survivalist. He obviously doesn't trust the government, and he lives in essentially a little suburb. And so when everybody is so mercilessly either executed or rounded up or taken to a quarantine zone in his town, he takes that opportunity to basically wall off and cordon off his little domain so that he can be safe. And that's all fine, well and good. He gets power, he gets electricity, he's managing resources. Now, the problem with this is, number one, of how clean it is. Number two is that, again, if you've played the game, you understand that Bill's town is nowhere near as nice, as pristine, as well done because of the volume of the infection in the game as opposed to the show. And this is kind of where I kind of land on this, because and by the way, guys, if you are new to this stream of videos, then you'll know that you won't know that I'm playing the game as the episodes come out. So as to not basically be gaslit by the narrative of the show. And I don't think that's intentional by any means, but I do want to kind of stay up to date when it comes to that, just because in my mind, it's good to keep the source material in perspective. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you played the game, you know that this particular area in this part of the story has a good number of infected in it. But in this watered down, divergent version of the events, you definitely see a difference in that. And part of me, like the way that the creators have talked about it in interviews for the show, they try to make it seem as though they're diverging from the story. But really, and this is just me being kind of a cynic, but to me, it just seems like a way to save money. And you'll be able to see the B-roll of this as this video is going on, but there are a lot of encounters with clickers, with runners, with various infected. And because of these encounters, there would have needed to be a lot of practical effects, a lot of action sequences, but instead in this episode, which basically takes all of Bill's storyline, all of his character development, and kind of chucks it, you don't get any of that. More importantly, you don't get the most important part, which is the interactions between Ellie and Bill and Joel. That is completely gone. So what's interesting about this episode is we get to see how Bill and Frank met each other. And essentially, Bill is living his life, and then Frank comes into it, stumbles into a trap. Bill saves him and takes him out of the hole. And then we find, and then here comes the ticking of the boxes. Now, of course, if you played the game, you know Bill is gay. But it's done so subtly and so nuanced that you have to actually find the clues and then get the story from Bill, and then you find, the other clues, and it's very interesting. This is kind of just beating you over the head every 2 seconds with the fact that this episode is a filler about a gay love story. Not to say that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but the way that the Frank character is portrayed is just so weird. So, they meet, he saves his life, Frank basically pushes his way in based on Bill's kindness. And then once Frank figures out that Bill is gay, he then, pushes himself onto Bill, and after that, then asks him his name. And it's so very funny because he basically pushes his way into Bill's life in a way that is insufferable if it was a female, but it's really weird coming from a guy. And it's so funny because basically, he even says the line in the episode where he says that he's not a whore and that he doesn't have he doesn't have sex for just a meal or whatever. But the reality of the situation is that he is in this situation to get all of the resources and security that Bill has to offer in the situation. And we basically go through a bunch of different time skips where we're seeing them interact, and it does not do a service to the story. There's a lot of contradictions. The what he said, prior to them having sex for the first time. Then when he wanted to basically make alterations and do some decorating, which, again, is a weird trope to go for a homosexual relationship, but whatever. Then, he's like, Bill asks him, it's like, hey, so we're going to have garden parties now? He's like, no. And the very next scene is them meeting Tess and Joel and having a freaking garden party. Like, it's so ridiculous. And it also undermines Joel and Tess's story, because if you've played the game, you know that Joel and Tess at one point were basically no better than bandits. And they lived a hard life in order to survive. And in the game, you know that so did Bill and so did Frank. But what you get here is this very sanitized version of the apocalypse, in which these type of things, where you're supposed to be, 10 or 15 miles outside of a major metropolitan area that would have been crawling with infected, even if, even after the bombings and whatnot, is taken away. And it's really sad to see that. Now, like I say, taken by itself, the episode is very lovely. The actors, Nick Offerman, and I forget the guy that plays Frank, but they do a fantastic job of presenting these versions of these characters. They have really good on-screen chemistry, but it's just that the episode itself, being that it's filler and it takes away any of the story progression that we would have had, is kind of disappointing, when we know that I think the series is only 8 or 9 episodes, and now we've wasted one on this. And like I say, I enjoyed parts of this episode. I enjoyed, certain scenes, but it was just, to me, it was severely lacking, and it could have done a lot better in terms of integrating this into the story, especially when you compare it to the source material. So, I mean, I'm not expecting shot for shot recreations of everything in the game, but you guys got to do better. I mean, this is, like I said, the emotional manipulation in order to cover for the fact that you guys couldn't do Bill's town the justice that it deserved from the source material is just very staggering. And the fact that Ellie and Bill never meet each other is even more egregious to me. But you go through this entire scene only for us to see that Frank has some sort of unknown illness and is in a wheelchair nearly 20 years after their initial meeting and their initial encounter. And what ends up happening is that he asks Bill to assist him in self-deletion, essentially. That other word is a no-no word, so we can't use it on YouTube. And so they get married, and then they, Bill helps him, but he also elects to self-delete as well. And so it's, supposed to be like a really beautiful, touching scene of them dying in each other's arms. But ultimately, again, it has no bearing on the story, and it's ultimately filler. We get maybe 10 minutes of Joel and Ellie in this entire episode, and the rest is devoted to a well done, admittedly, but ultimately pointless filler episode. So, I mean, for what it was, taken by itself, I enjoyed the episode, but for The Last of Us in general, for the scene, for the amount of sorrow and sadness, this episode was far too happy and just felt out of place to me in a world that's supposed to have been decimated by this fungal infection. You guys let me know what y'all think about the episode. I know that a lot of people liked it. Like I said, I liked the episode, and I don't want you guys to get me wrong, but I just think from the perspective of the source material, it didn't do it for me. Sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys thought about this entire thing, and let's talk about it. And we'll see you on the next one. 8-Bit Heroes out. Peace.
If you'd like to get a shout out on the channel, then hit that like button, maybe share it with a couple of friends, and do us the biggest honor of all, and subscribe to the channel so you can join the 8-Bit Heroes family. And while you're at it, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when our new videos come out.